Hello, all you listeners out there. Well, actually, let's be real. We may only have two listeners, Brad, and that might be my mother and yours. But here we are. So I am very happy to introduce you to the one, the only, Brad Siroski. Uh,
Oh,
quick,
Al,
quick background story here. Brad was actually one of my students in a mental health and wellness program who quickly became one of my teachers, and I'm proud to say a good friend as well. And when I first heard Brad's story, I was not only intrigued, but also inspired. So, Brad, just to start off, I want to read a little bit of an excerpt from your story in the book Men and Mental Health. And here is what you said. You said, on February 2nd, 2009, my beautiful daughter, Kiara, entered the world. I gently held my precious girl in my arms for the first time, and she fell asleep. I looked at Kiara and made her a promise. I'm going to be the dad that you deserve. I will never use drugs again. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital parking lot doing a line of cocaine in my drug dealer's car. I mean, Brad, that is pretty raw. How did it feel for you to go through that experience at that time?
well, it was my life is kind of spinning out of control at that point. And first of all, I want to start by saying that even listening to you read that part right now, it still is causes a lot of emotions in me. It almost brings tears to my eyes still listening to it because that's a tough part of my life, and it was a really tough it was tough to live through that and to you want to be the best that you can be for somebody, and you truly want to give up that addiction, and you just feel like you've lost all control over it. Like I said, I held my daughter, I made a promise. 8 hours later, I was using in the parking lot, and it was a combination of a lot of things. And at that point, I felt hopeless and I felt worthless, and the drugs had overtaken me. And the thing is that when I felt a lot of hopelessness, worthlessness, and I felt a lot of shame. And that's a common topic throughout this book of Men and Mental Health, is the shame that people felt, and how we're healing from it now. But I felt so much shame. And the thing about the hopelessness and the worthlessness and the shame is that when you feel that, you want to do anything to not feel that anymore. And what I did was, what I would do is I would use drugs and alcohol to not feel that. And as brief of an escape as it was still an escape from that hopelessness, that worthlessness, that shame. And it was just a way for me to get away from there. But then the problem was, as we all know, is that eventually, I would come down, or the drugs would wear off, and I would have to feel all that again, and it was way worse. And at that point, I just felt like my life I was going in a vicious circle. And I had ruined so much of my life, and I was making these promises and breaking these promises on such a regular basis that it was becoming habitual. And the more that it happened, the worse I felt, and the harder it seemed to dig my way out of that big pit that I was in. You know, I had uh,
Yeah.
I had I had broken all these promises to all these people. I'd lost my family, I'd lost friends, I'd lost jobs. I was very sick from my addiction. I was having seizures. All that stuff was going on in my life. And I still couldn't get myself better. That's the hold that addiction can have on you. It can take you from a promise that means the world to you, and that's the promise that I made that my daughter, and quickly pull you back down into those dark depths, and you're right back there feeling that hopelessness, worthlessness, and shame all over again.
Yeah, you paint a beautiful picture, Brad, of the realities of addiction and the hold that it can take. And I mean, now you're also a motivational speaker, you do counseling, and I'm sure that you were asked numerous times, why don't you just stop? Why don't you just stop? And now, as an educator, or even when you look back at what you're going through, are there some things that you like? Do you have some tools now to reply to that? Why? Why can't you stop?
Yeah, I mean, what I think people don't realize when they ask that question is, why don't you just stop? Is it's not just the chemical hook of addictions that holds you. It's the trauma. It's all the stuff you've experienced in your past life, in what's been going on prior to that, that's leading you back into the addictions. It's not for I think for I can't say 100%, but I would say probably for 95% of the people I talk to, it's not just the chemical hook. It's the pain that they're going through. It's that shame, that worthlessness, that hopelessness, that social anxiety. Those are the things that people don't think about when they ask you, why can't you just stop? Like what it's yeah, I don't know. It's just it's not as easy as people paint it out to be. I remember people just saying to me, well, just don't drink anymore. Like, just put the bottle down. And I would say, I wish it was that easy. Like, I mean, I would wake up every morning to a bottle of vodka. I had become so dependent physically, mentally, and emotionally on the drugs and alcohol that I couldn't live without it. So it would be like telling somebody, and I think I'm actually stealing this quote from you, Al. It would be like saying, why don't you stop breathing?
Right.
I needed that to survive at that point. I needed it physically. If I didn't have it physically, I would have seizures. Mentally and emotionally, it was covering up all the scars and all the hurt that I had, all the lies I had told, all the damage I had done, all the stuff that happened to me when I was younger, the younger social anxiety, all that kind of stuff. It's just a lot harder to tell people, or ask people, why don't you just stop? It's better to ask people, why do you feel the need? Why are you drinking? Why are you using? What's causing this? And a lot of people can't open up about that right away, and that's okay. Just sit back, and when they're ready, they will tell you. They will share that with
Yeah.
you.
And I think that's a good segue, Brad. Like, you touched on the social anxiety piece, and you've gone through a lot of pain throughout your childhood and in your life. And do you mind just touching briefly on the relationship that then does exist between mental illness and addiction?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, like I said, in so many, I can't say 100% of the time because I've never actually tested it, but I would say with 95% of the people that I talk to, deal with, run into, there's some kind of trauma, mental health problem, something that stemmed, that the drink, like, led to the drinking, something that, or the drug use or whatever. In my case, I turned back to the drinking a lot because drugs and alcohol were my big problem, primarily alcohol, right? So, but with that, 9 times out of 10 for sure, there's mental abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse. There's anxiety, depression, all those things that, for me, I was a socially anxious kid. When I started drinking and realized that, hey, when I drink, I can talk about whatever I want and I don't have that anxiety anymore, it opened a whole new world for me. So there's so many different things. And towards the end of my drinking and drug use, I had so much depression and anxiety that I just used that. I said it was that a temporary escape. I might have only felt good for 20 minutes or an hour or whatever, but it was that temporary escape because I didn't want to be, I was so depressed and so anxious. I didn't want to feel that any longer.
Yeah. And it is logical, isn't it, Brad, to want to leave behind any feelings of discomfort, any kind of pain in exchange for pleasure. And therefore, I guess to heal, we kind of have to look at some of that pain. And do you mind just walking us through essentially how you're able to navigate through some of your own pain and how you're able to get to a point from that parking lot to where you are today?
Well, I think I always talk about, I always say sometimes 5, 6, 7. It depends on how I break them up. Steps that I went through, and I think, as most people know, I went through a program called the Teen Challenge Program, which is a faith-based program, and I always talk about how that Teen Challenge Program, it gave me like these 6 or 7 tools to essentially change my life. And the first thing that happened there was, when I walked up to the door, I ran into all these people that were non-judgmental. They loved you unconditionally, and I had a lot of people like that in my life, but I had pushed them away.
Hmm.
So when I ran into these people and they welcomed me in, and they didn't care what class I came from, what color my skin was, any of that stuff, they just welcomed me in and loved on me unconditionally. That was kind of the start. And then I met all these like-minded men these guys that all they wanted to do was get better. They wanted to heal. They wanted to be the better versions of themselves. They didn't want to live in that darkness, that despair, that worthlessness and shame any longer. They wanted to move on. And I connected with a lot of those guys. A lot of those guys are still great friends of mine today. And I use them for support, and they've used me for support, you know. So when I first got out of Teen Challenge, I had a rough year transition back. And when I was struggling, I would go back out to the Teen Challenge Center and connect with those guys that were sober. And it was a crucial part of my recovery. Another thing that I received or came to in that program was I developed a faith. I believed in something higher than myself. I started to pray, to meditate, to do all this stuff, and to believe that there's more controlling this than me. And when I started to see that faith and things started to shine through, and I started to have, from having my faith, I started to see the most beautiful outcomes from it, like believing in stuff and trusting in stuff. It would come back to me tenfold, and that was huge for me too, Al. And then I took counseling. I took counseling. I talked about things, and this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest thing, is it inevitably led to me using my voice. I would have to talk on outreaches at Teen Challenge and share my story. And what I felt from that, sharing that story with people, was, first of all, a love on you, like support, but I felt healing. Every time I shared my story, it felt like, if you relate to religion, it felt like I was kneeling down in a confessional and confessing all my sins. And when I got up, I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. So I got that. And finally, with that came happiness. I truly believe, and I know you can attest to this, Al, because you're one of the happiest people that I know. You're always got a smile on your face. You're constantly lifting people's spirits. It's with me, I truly believe that until you find that you can be happy without your drug or alcohol or whatever it is that's ailing you, that you're probably going to struggle healing. Because for me, until I realized that I could be happy without drugs and alcohol in my life, I couldn't live. I kept falling back to them. So all of those things combined in one big picture kind of helped me heal. And I mean, I always bounce back to the holistic approach, right? I check in every day, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And when those things are in check, then I'm the best version of me that I can be.
You say it well, my friend. You say it well. That sounds like a beautiful book someday. You know, you're so right with that piece of vulnerability and the power of sharing your story. I know that you also touched on the fact that there are a couple barriers to overcome when it came to being a man, being vulnerable, talking about some of your pain. Do you mind just walking us through some of the scripts that you grew up with as a young boy and how you're able to break some of those down?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people over the ages of 35, maybe even a little younger than that, kind of grew up in that time of, be a man. You fall down and get a scratch, rub some dirt in it. Don't cry. I'll give you something to cry about. All these messages, like real men don't cry. Don't show your emotions. You have to be the breadwinner. All those, all the, with lack of a better term, bullshit that comes along with it. That stuff was toxic to me because I didn't think it was okay. My father wasn't he didn't share a lot of emotions. I wasn't a real open guy to begin with because I didn't think it was okay. And I mean, it wasn't just my father that taught this. It was the whole society at that time. It was on television. It was taught to you in school. Men are they were perceived in this certain way. And it wasn't okay to cry. And it's that, to me, that's toxic masculinity. I think that Gillette only got part of it right, when they did their commercial. So I don't always like to use the word toxic and masculinity together, because I don't have a problem with being a masculine person. I don't think there's toxicity to that as long as you do it right. I also cry. I also share my emotions. I encourage my child to share her emotions. I encourage men. I sit in men's groups and we talk openly and we love on each other and we cry and we share our feelings, and that's okay. That's where this wall needs to be broken down. And I think if Gillette would have did a commercial that wasn't just didn't just paint us to be a bunch of frickin' Neanderthals, and actually added in some fathers giving their sons hugs. You know, maybe they show a son fall down on the baseball field and start to cry, and the father runs out and hugs him and tells him it's okay. Not don't cry in front of people. It's okay. You know, let those emotions out, because it's toxic. What's toxic is leaving all that terrible shit inside. That's what's toxic. So, I mean, I think through my I share with all the men now what I was instilled with as a child, and I also share with them how much of a breakthrough and how freeing it was for me when I could actually start, when I sat down and cried for the first time and shared with my counselor some of those emotions that I had never talked to anybody about. I talk to them about that, and in turn I see them turn around and talk to me and talk to others, and it's like this well, I mean, we all know how the coronavirus is spread. I think that we can spread positivity in the same way. Just keep passing it on to other people. Keep encouraging other people to talk, and that it's okay to share your emotions and to feel. That's it. It's that simple.
It's that simple. There you have it. It sounds to me, Brad, like we need to make a new commercial for Gillette. Yes?
Yeah, I think Gillette, we do. We need to get Gillette's people on the phone and
Okay.
really talk to them about including all the most important parts of that commercial.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they could afford you, but other than that, it would be a good idea. Well, listen, Brad, I have so much respect for the way that you walk through life, your vulnerability, your honesty. I know that you're sporting the Love My Mind um, shirt as well from Darren Anderson. Do you mind just talking a bit about why even wearing a shirt like that is important?
Yeah, I mean, I think I love Darren. I love the cause. He's got some great things going on right now. Check out the Love My Mind page, because there's not enough time for me to plug all the amazing stuff that they do. But you know what? It says, right, self, mind, love. And you know what? I look at it this way. If I love my mind, I love myself, then I can love others unconditionally, you know. Uh, and and that includes, you know, like I said, loving myself. And there's just so many great causes that I've been involved with. It was an honor to be a part of this book, Al. I think this has been an amazing thing, and to put this in that, I try and get every opportunity I get. I try and plug the book or put it into somebody's hands so that they can read it, because I truly believe that when men get out there and start talking about stuff, that we're going to see a change. Maybe we don't. Maybe the statistics don't have to read, you know, women talk, men die. And they don't have, maybe stuff like that doesn't have to be printed, right? And so these causes, stuff like Love My Mind, stuff like your book. I do a program called Talking to Youth Live. We got to start with the youth when they're young, right? Like we got to start letting these young men, young women know it's okay to share your feelings. It's okay to have bad days. You know, you need to have that someone to talk to, and you need to have that one person in your life. And if you don't have that person, um, look onto my page. I'll attach my number and you can call me, because I'll be that person. But that's what these causes are about. They're about really encouraging people to, when they're ready, talk. And that's why it's so important for me to wear the shirt, to be in the book, to be part of the program, to talk about it wherever I can. There's just some amazing things coming forward. And with it being Mental Health Week, I just think that I wore a shirt yesterday that said "Advocate or Die,"
Hmm.
and you know, that's how I feel. I want to be there for people. I want to help people that need it, because there was people there that helped me when I needed it. So
Yeah, so many great insights, Brad. Thank you very much. For two two men with ADD, we did pretty good.
I know it's fantastic. You know how hard it was to sit still in this chair for, like, what is it, 18 minutes here?
Yeah,
I,
I'm losing my mind on this little stool. Um, Listen, uh, so much respect for your journey. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing out there. I know that you have led and will continue to lead many support groups for men. You give them permission to talk, And you, in my eyes, are definitely a real man, and it's a privilege to know you. Thank you for your insights. We will talk soon, brother.
Yes, it was a privilege to be able to have this conversation with the man that I consider a mentor. Thank you so much, Al.
Thanks, Brad. Goodbye.